quickly, in case you want to see again. Let's just do that. So Michael and I have seen all this before. We've seen that before. We've done our homework. We're not just sharing papers we read across the street today. We synthesized hundreds of those in this whole series. We're talking about that and many of those other things that pop up. So this is a unique brand of material that is outside voice. Outside. Okay. We'll give it a shot.
You can speak up even more.
Okay. So here's what we're going to do today. We're going to do a quick strategy recap. We'll do our tech, and then we'll engage in a tactical deep dive. That's going to be AI architecture strategy. Michael's going to bring that to you primarily. I'll bring you back up there. We'll do a couple of select what I call development resources. We've got a couple of things sliding here and there. Then we have about what we have. That's really what that's going to be. And then we'll get into Q&A. So previously, in session number 1, we had audience interaction. And we will do that again. We talked about what I say GenAI, what some of the words you think of. This is what everyone's thinking of. There's a whole different batch of that today. Where's your company in the AI journey? POCs, Center of Excellence, distributed. This is kind of what the audience said before. What do you hope to accomplish? These are kinds of things we did before. We'll do more of that now. One of the things that we talked about last time was when you think of technology, you can't think of digital technology anymore. You have to think of biotech, nanotech, and quantum tech, and a whole bunch of other technologies out there. We're inclined to think it's just digital because we've grown up with that. Everybody's got a PS4 or a phone or a network or a computer. But that's not all there is. You have to think in these terms. Because our inspection of what's going on out there suggests that these guys are all general purpose technologies too. They will have as much of a profound impact on how business is done, how society organizes itself than AI ever will. But we don't know anything about that. So I want to start with that as a foundational thought. We talked about the VUCAD world and AI's general purpose technology and how that impacted strategy and why we need to get into a future company readiness mentality, why that's important. So that's one of the things we covered. This is kind of a roadmap of things we're going to cover. I'm not going to go heavily into that. We will, today, dig into the wider AI maturity model. This is where the rubber meets the road in terms of consulting. How do we look at an organization comparative and how do we develop a roadmap of action to lead that maturity to occur? We'll be doing that in number 3. So we talked about this. We talked about this as well. Defining a VUCAD world. The only thing that I want to stop for and touch base on this as we look at the fact that we're in a global technology arms race, and that is really kind of forging everything, is this one right here. Accelerating rates of change make time a dominant consideration as opposed to things in space, which means that the accelerating rate of innovation in your organization as you have to achieve how this is playing out over time with all the technologies is going to be the only differentiator between you and your competition. Can you change yourself faster than anyone else? So this must be a key thing in your own strategy. The acceleration of innovation is going to be the big differentiator to keep that in the back of mind. We did talk about AI as a general purpose technology and bringing together some unique characteristics that need to be factored in any of the economics. We did talk about that. And then we said, hey, these are general purpose technologies too. They will have a significant effect on what we do as well. AI is just test this out and implementing AI. That should be it. This is one more. Okay. No, that's the priority. Yes. Sorry. Cool. He likes it for sprawl. Did you anything like mine? Cool about that. So as you guys are doing this, I'll throw a few things out there just to kind of keep you occupied. Compliance is an interesting thing, especially when you hear this term ensure. Can you ensure that this will happen or this won't happen? And those are usually terms spoken by people who have never had any experience in this space because they use those terms. But the moment you talk to a good legal compliance guy, they go, there's no ensuring anything. That's a gradient of risk management. So when people use the word ensure, you're going to ensure this, ensure that. You know one thing for sure, they don't know what they're doing. Just keep that in mind.
Look at that. Okay. Executives, I love it. So, in this way, we have a lot of executives.
Executive buy-in?
Yeah. Security.
Funding?
Yeah. Funding.
What's the number one source of control for any project?
We get a lot of stuff. Okay. Cool. Well, I see the big one coming through is focus. And I'm sure, like, that probably relates to, let me go back to the prioritization conversation, which we're going to talk about here in a second. Leads us to how I interpret focus. Because you know, let's be honest, there's only a finite number of resources, particularly what it takes to deploy, develop, even at the POC stage, AI project skills. Okay. It takes a lot of resources, and because you have that finite pool, you're going to have to prioritize. We'll talk about that. So big pitfalls from our experience. First is, there's three principles I want to call out. And this is based on my experience working on digital transformation, both with traditional, like deep learning, machine learning models, and generative AI now, is bring the AI development to the data. So how many people here have heard of data mesh? Wow, a lot of hands. I didn't expect that. Okay, so is that I lifted this principle straight from the data mesh playbook because I felt like it's something that isn't often discussed, but I feel like you need the whole concept of decentralizing data and not having to centralize it. So much of people's careers and so much of IT thinking and the architectural thinking these days have been built around the concept of let's bring all the data together, right? And so data mesh as a strategy, I think one of the things I like about it as an architect, especially in relation to scaling AI, is it completely flips that paradigm on its head. Says you don't need to do that. Keep the data where it's at, and let the business manage it. They are the owners, they are subject matter experts. And then obviously you're going to have to bring some data together if you're going to do things like reporting, especially regulatory reporting or standardized financials. But most of the data you should be able to keep where it's at and leave it with the experts who are using it. So that's one of the principles of the data mesh architecture playbook that I really like to highlight. And that comes to support this principle of bringing the AI development to the data. So you don't have to avoid the bloat, you avoid the politics that comes with trying to centralize everything. Okay? The second principle is keep it simple. Build a single environment for the main product. So one of the first things I always run into when I start an organization on the edge is I start to talk to the engineers and solution architects, like, what are you guys building? Because I can tell immediately from how they're building things, where they're at, their level of maturity and skills with generative AI in particular. And what I saw coming into pretty much every situation I ran into, whether it's my previous company or the current company, is a lot engineers by nature like to build things. They love the fanciest, coolest new technology. They may not be very good at it, but it's, they want to be the cool kids too, right? So they're going to take technology that maybe they half understand, and they're going to try to put it together. And so there is this tendency to be complex and to build up these solutions. Well, if you're trying to scale AI, especially where the technology is at right now, generative AI is very, very new. It's a shifting landscape. I think I've changed my roadmap like 8 times since being at Boston Scientific. That's how fast the landscape is changing. So in this situation, you want to go opposite of complexity. You want to go simplicity as possible. Because the more complex you make it a solution, the tougher it is to scale, the more stakeholders you have. So from a technical standpoint, and also from a business standpoint, you want to keep it simple. And that's what this second principle really talks about. Make it native, make it in a single environment. How many people here are working with in an organization where you have a single cloud? Not that many. Right, because why? Because most organizations are multi-cloud, right? So now you have to deal with at least 2 different environments. Some organizations I've talked to very much one. I recently attended a presentation, 2 actually, one at Target and one at Ford. And Ford is one of those organizations that they are pretty much single cloud in their entire organization. So, and their AI practice is super advanced. Sorry, okay. So, to make it simple, now they're definitely the exception to the rule. And I was talking to their chief architect, and you realize we have like all the advantages to do this. It's like, yep, we're single cloud. We've been doing natural language processing for years. We've got advanced data science and advanced engineering support. So, but most organizations are going to be multi-cloud. So you're already in a complex situation to start. So don't make it more complicated. Keep it simple. Sure.
We expand on what is native products. I mean, there's a couple things coming to my mind that really
Native products. So if you're good, meaning like Ford, for example, they are a GCP first organization. So they'll build their they have the advantage of building like their generative AI product in Versaggi, which is their platform. They can experiment with almost all the different large language models, right? So their goal is always, and I talked to their chief architect, is to build out as much within that Versaggi platform that they can. So they're not trying to do things like build, and this is common, like building 2 clouds, right? Now that so they could, for example, a lot of organizations will build out their entire application or use platform in AWS, and then try to go and access like a different language model in a different environment. There's ways to do that at scale, but like you want to avoid where you're having to do that across multiple cloud environments and multiple data sources if you can. So just simple that way. Good question. The third principle is treat data as a product and follow the governance process. Brought that in. Now, again, this is also lifted from the data mesh playbook, but I think it's so important and so powerful. In fact, if you study data mesh and like in some of the number of books you have already been exposed to it, that is probably the hardest thing, but it's probably the most important because if you execute treating data as a product well, you avoid a lot of issues from data quality and ownership, which you're going to need to solve, ironically, to build AI at scale. A lot of the issues when you try to scale AI really can be fixed by developing that strong product practice within the data and really treating it as a product, which a lot of organizations aren't good at, but so critical. Matt? Okay. All right, and this, I love this diagram because I like to call it the Versaggi curve. So no relation to like the lobster curve, but when I was like, wow, that looks like a great name for this.
So, quick developmental detour on this. We showed this quickly last week. We changed it up a little bit, but this is a use case tool to elaborate use case. So on the left-hand side, you've got practitioner capabilities, right? Here are consultants. These are their skills. They either have very generic, common skills like RPA and that kind of stuff, or they have very specialized skills like, elementary particle physics, or deep law, or claims or clinical or genetics, that kind of stuff. And on the bottom side, you have the required, that's the key term, domain-specific knowledge plus, this is a big word, experience, right? Because wisdom comes from experience. And those are the requirements for that. So when you have these, on the bottom, low requirements for that, and generic, you can get any old consultant who doesn't know a lick about your business to automate your team. So that's the bottom side of it. At the very top, when you have this sort of rare need and high experience and knowledge, you're not going to get a generic guy from Accenture or something like that to come in and do work, right? You're going to have PhDs or somebody who has deep knowledge of your business, whatever it is, and they're going to create brand new, unique digital artifacts and more. So we know that those two are clear. By the way, GenAI sits in the common area, by and large, until you begin injecting business-specific information. Where it gets dicey is the middle, surprise, surprise. So we've got mid-tier, and it's kind of deep domain, but kind of not, and that's where you're going to be directing an email there. That's what this does. It helps you understand when the client, when the consultant comes in and goes, I can help you with GenAI, I'm a GenAI expert. I've been doing Bitcoin last week, but this week I'm a GenAI expert. So this helps you understand.
Awesome thing. I love that. I wanted to label it the Versaggi curve because I was like, it's just so labeled. So a lot of people here, like, I'm more on the business side, right? And you always, common question, I guess, I don't, most of the business folks I talk to, particularly the high level people go up, they just want to know, like, am I investing in the right thing? You know, what use cases should I be paying attention to? Right, so this graph, I use it now on a regular basis to have that conversation because it's not techy at all. There's no tech attached to it at all. And it really is focused on that concept of use cases and how the use cases evolve as the higher you get, right? So as Matt was saying, like, on the x-axis, that really shows you like your domain-specific knowledge range, right? And it always starts in the lower you get, the easier use cases. Those are usually like experimental and internal. So use cases that target what I call optimization and efficiency. So things that can be solved with like Copilot, things that can be solved for any kind of low-code type of, and there's like hundreds of these days, low-code, generative AI chat solutions. I won't mention any specifics because I've also told me not to. There's hundreds of them. That's really where you're going to see the opportunities from an architecture and a strategic standpoint, because they are low-hanging fruit. You don't need, it's not that you don't have to be an expert. You just have to be good enough to like bring it into the beat, right, or play around with it, and that's appropriate. But now, if you step into the second and definitely the third, now you need like a real data domain expert. That's when you start needing data science. That's when you start looking at custom solutions. And Justin can tell you, the higher you go in the data realm, in generative AI especially, the requirements start to escalate and they get more complicated. And what happens when the data gets complicated? You're going to need a higher skill level in your data engineers and your folks that are data scientists that know the domain, right? Because guess what? The LLM, it's not going to know anything if you don't get it. So if you're expecting like magic to happen, and how I like to say that what's really interesting about generative AI, and starting with like data strategy and data landscape, is profound. Because if you think about it, step one in like data, when I talk about like how generative AI is aged, like data strategy, right? Think about it. First stage of data strategy was let's like start to centralize everything and let's start to put the data together, which is good, but then we got caught in that paradigm of like data warehousing, everything's in depth, right? And then realized like, oh, when I started doing my first generation, and I saw this all the time, when you're trying to scale a solution, it's very tough. The data warehousing is good for reporting, but it's terrible at getting data like when you need it. Like it's very slow and very expensive. It takes a lot of expertise. So now you use the second stage. Let's build data lakes, right? And I call that the lake shore effect, right? So, which is great because data scientists love it. You dump data in a big repository and they can go to town, right? So, the problem with that is you need to be really good at the data. Now you're moving into the second and third tier. But you need, guess what? You need to have like those experts of the data and experts not only at manipulating it, but also understanding it, right? So now, we were stuck in that for many years. That's where I got my first exposure to AI. I was working on large data, building large data lakes, data platforms, the big data era. That was a part of like years of my career in that. And now, in this stage of my career, it's definitely the age of AI. Now the paradigm is this. Close your eyes for a second, okay? Playing around with it. Picture a lamp. Alright, like in Aladdin, picture a lamp. Now rub the lamp. What happens when you rub a magic lamp? What happens? Bingo, right? And what does the genie do? It magically knows everything in red solutions, right? So that's what I'm seeing with generative AI. Like, that is a magic genie in the lamp that every senior leader I talk to, they're like, give me that magic, right? I want to rub the data and I'll pop my hand. Seriously, you laugh, but I'm telling you, like, I have this conversation like 5 days a week. That is the very that is the mentality that I'm trying to understand, right? Is literally the genie effect, right? And that's good and bad. One is good because, well, hey, this is an opportunity to really solve, like in healthcare, some of the biggest problems that we have been unable to solve, right? And we'll talk a little bit about that, but that's good. The not so good, and I think the opportunity is, it's not as simple, right? You need good data. All the things I highlighted before, you need all that to work. And that does not happen by rubbing a magic lamp. So, no. Alright. So, okay. So now I'm gonna show you the design for something that's not a magic lamp, right? So I created this diagram because my boss was like, I need you, Mike, to explain to me the AI landscape. I'm like, what are you talking about? They have like 100 architects here in this practice. Yeah, thousands of engineers. You have hundreds of data scientists. They can all answer this basic question. And he's like, no, I'm like sitting in these meetings and nobody is helping like answer my question. I'm like, well, what is your question? Because I want to know it. And so it was basically what he was asking me, like, I need you to paint me a picture so I can connect the dots myself. Right? Tell me how to understand AI at an enterprise level, right? And so I can talk to our chief digital officer, I can talk to our CEO, right? Because the conversations in generative AI right now are occurring literally at the board level, to the C level, and everything else in between. So he was asked, so I created a framework that's non-technical, but yet can speak to the technology and basically break down an AI strategy. So in its 6 layers that I came up with, and to tell you, like, I wish I was as talented as smart as like, and be able to create like this actual diagram at the beginning, but it honestly took probably 10 months to evolve at this point. So as I learned and iterated, got feedback, and finally this model, this framework seems to fit. And I'll show you later on how to apply that. It makes sense of it, so you guys also have a conversation around AI strategy. So you see the central one, starting with governance. That is very, very important. And then after that, the enterprise platform, because, well, I do work in a CIO org, so that's the bias, but that's important because you're going to need it, and I'll explain why later. And then what you see on the outer ring are all the things that I ran into literally when I started talking about AI strategy. Like, everybody in the audience always has, there's always a critic, right? So that's very true when you're operating at enterprise level. And so these outer rings really emerge naturally as I'm talking about AI strategy. The first one was data. In fact, I resisted to add it, but I got that question so many times I decided to add it. Then the other one was business areas, and that is the need for the low-code platform. You'll start to hear about that because the level of marketing that Microsoft is doing and OpenAI is doing right now, that's where you're going to see a lot of the low-code value. The second is the enterprise scenarios where, unless you're operating in the corporate IT realm, you probably won't hear a lot about it, but even like startups are talking about it, right? And these are standardized solutions that you can scale across any company. That's where the data is the most sensitive, and you see like big platforms investing in it, even startups are investing in it, which is good. So, and then the third one is obviously the data science, but and then you can't do AI without establishing a strong data science practice, right? So, insight. So if you apply that framework, you start to create your roadmap for AI development. Here are some insights that I've learned through this journey. The first one is include the human in the loop when you're designing your workflow processes. Why? Because if you've been on a real AI project, especially a generative AI project, the first thing that the team is going to do is like try to define and understand that business process. Because if they don't do that well, then they're not going to come up with a good solution. You have to understand those expectations, and you need a human to exploit that. And even in the later stages when you roll it out, you always going to need to have a human, especially if you work in a highly regulated environment like I do, where you have, you're governed by so many regulations. The humans are always the experts, and always the last one to have to be able to control like what actually goes out of the output. In fact, to meet certain regulatory environments, that is a requirement. Is that right, Matt? So GDPR especially, you're going to have that. So that's important. Like, second piece is be vigilant, having a monitoring process. AI does hallucinate. There is model drift. The data is going to change. Guess what? If the data changes, the AI is going to change. So you need to have good monitoring systems. And it gets more difficult with generative AI because the foundation models are very, very complex. And a lot of startups are trying to resolve that issue right now because there isn't a good methodology, to be honest, that has emerged around measuring hallucinations when you're talking about foundation models. But that's something that every organization is trying to figure out, and especially a lot of startups. Third, I gave this presentation in Detroit over there yesterday to my alumni group, and my mentor, the architect alumni group, she raised her hand and looked like, I think you're showing a picture of my house. So this is taken from Norway as a fjord. But I'm trying to illustrate, so imagine like this is on the right where the people are saying on the ledge. That is like your data science, your data scientists, your data engineers that you're trying to train and develop an AI model. And on the other side, this massive gorge is like your deployment. So this is a big piece because telling my team, like, hey, I'm going to talk about AI strategy, like, you need to talk about this, about how people don't understand, like, it's a huge risk from developing AI, and it's the fun part, and the data science is actually deploying. So that's a big piece. There isn't enough emphasis in that, and one of the reasons why I added it as a big four is that's something you need to think about, it's something you're going to have to invest in, both in people expertise as well as technology to make things happen. Or guess what, if you don't do this part right, you're never going to get any kind of value, right, Matt? For many things. It has to be deployed. And it can be very difficult. Okay. Question? And then that's what I said, we're going to talk about prioritization. So let's poll you guys and see what you can get from a priority standpoint. Yeah.
Why do they do this? I'm just going to put another bucket here. The low-code, no-code environments, why are they strategically important is the question. And the answer is that you can now take business people who don't have coding skills and they can participate in development